wrath question. Okay, God is love. God is light. In him there's no darkness. There's no element of wrath in that sense. Julian of Norwich, in her vision, said, I looked and I couldn't see any blame in God, no wrath. So even though the church talks about wrath, I didn't see any. So I don't know what to make of it. So no wrath in God in the sense of something contrary to love. God's love being perfect, undiminished, uncompromising. He's therefore totally opposed to everything that hurts us. Okay? So because he loves, and because he loves perfectly, he's therefore, in a sense, wrathful about all that gets in the way of our happiness, about everything that diminishes us. And from what we have here and from what the church teaches, we can say, God is infinitely offended when my son trips and falls. Infinitely offended. Not at my son, for my son. Okay? That this is an injustice, contrary to God's love. Right? It's not what he intended for us, and therefore he is reacting to this with the fullness of his power, with no holding back. Now, why doesn't it look a little more like there's some action going on? Why isn't he more successful? Well, this accounts for that, and I can get into that at length if it's interesting to you. But he's infinitely opposed and reacts fully, and wrath is really the term that describes that, but it's a wrath that's identical to love. It's not...
And it's the only language in the that language in the Old Testament is saying precisely that. Were you to take the wrath language out of the Old Testament, you would have a God who's morally indifferent. So what that language of wrath is saying is, I'm totally opposed to this. I'm telling you, I don't like it. It's not of me. It's not of my way.
Can you tie that, Chris, to what I saw as two types of suffering?
Sure.
One as the causal aspects of sin and individually rippling, cumulative effect of everybody's sin, right? That's the one. But then the other one was which I found most interesting, was and they say that about spiritual growth. It's like watching the grass grow, right? You can't see it, but you still have to get out and mow it every week. So, but this, what you discussed, multiple areas about avoiding this clash, right? And then God's gradually transforming your soul by extracting it out of this disordered world. And that's painful as you have to let go of things. So I got a little bit how did that fit together? In terms of what you were just saying, does that fit together?
That's a fabulous question. So the kind of suffering that would be something like characterizing the dark night of the soul versus the kind of suffering that, fills a hospital. Okay, so where shall I begin? Most basically then, according to the original intent of God, he didn't intend the spiritual life to be difficult at all. And there's a paragraph that directly talks about that. It wasn't that he set us up in a world and then required that we run a certain spiritual obstacle course to become whole persons. He set us up as whole persons. Now, there would be growth, would always be learning more about each other and God, and there would be growth, but there wouldn't be anguish and relinquishment and agony. Okay, that was something that came as the result of sin. Now, why did it come as the result of sin? How could sin change things so much that now, even though we want God, we also fight God? Okay, I think pretty much everyone here has had that experience. We want God, but we don't want God. And even when we want God with what we think is our whole heart, the next day we want Him with 50% of the heart, or the next month, depending on your constitution. I can usually last not a month, but why? And why are we so driven towards selfishness in the first place? Why didn't He program us a little more diligently so that we could be more moral, more easily, okay? So why is there a problem that He has to fix through spiritual pain anyhow? All right, this is a long answer. Are you sure you want it? Because I'm happy to give it. I just want to make sure that I'm not over-talking the point. I would like to, because I think it's informative. Okay. First, I'm just gonna like stab at this because there are a lot of different facets.
Let me also preface that with the reason I asked that is in our communications we need to get it to where the average person can relate to this, and I believe that the average person is trying to be in the world but not of the world and all that, and it's like, okay, why is there this constant conflict, right?
Yes.
Constant
Right, and
conflict.
apart from knowing this, the conflict is greater. Right?
And we're to become spirit, Jesus becomes spirit as I am spirit, and to shift from being carnal to spirit, it's not easy to do.
Right. Plus, it's actually a very provocative statement that God didn't intend spirituality to be difficult, because I would think that most well-formed Catholics consider it, a journey. And it's like, you got to really work at it and all that stuff. So,
and that's true.
It's
It's a journey that will completely. You have to be completely undone and
Climb
remade,
that
and
ladder.
it's not easy. But it wasn't that way in the beginning. Okay.
But part of your argument, by the way, is it's a difficult journey because we don't have the right tools, because we're not looking at it with the right framework. And what Chris is trying to present here is a better framework to make it easier.
It will
to
make it
move,
easier.
to move down that spiritual path.
For spiritual directors, it will make it so that it's like we have nuclear weapons against the problems that would otherwise cause people to go in circles for 10 or 20 years.
That's true.
agreed.
Okay.
It's a pair of hiking boots. For your
And people have already
spiritual
started using it in that capacity, like a counseling, unofficial counseling. Nobody's practicing medicine without a license, but counseling friends who are in desperate need. And as Nick said, someone will go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, with just one of these principles understood. It's like the light goes on and the devil's ammunition is taken away. Okay, so let me try to answer your question, which is a very good one. Now, okay, so the world was created in original justice. So, and this is the teaching of the church. In that teaching, it says all aspects, all dimensions of man's life were confirmed. Okay, so we had everything we needed. It was well with us. It was well one to another. It was well in myself. Okay, there wasn't a dog fight in my chest going on. One desire against another. The one you feed is the one that will win. I didn't have to have that kind of wisdom to fight this desire. It was just harmony. Okay, harmony. Harmony between God and man. Harmony between person and person. Harmony between myself and myself. Okay. Sin brought an element of disorder into the world. So the world in the human sphere, I'm not talking outside the garden about whether or not animals were eating each other. I'm not denying evolution. I'm saying within the human sphere, okay? And this is the teaching of the church. The church doesn't take a stance on evolution or not, but they do teach positively in man's life, had he been obedient to God, he would have been immune to suffering and death. All right? Suffering meaning any deprivation of a do-good, all right? And bodily death as well. So not some abstract death of the spirit, but death and suffering were not in the picture. Okay, so we had everything that we needed and we had harmony. Sin introduced into the human sphere brought an element of disorder. That element of disorder was something that shouldn't have been. It was a discordant note. Okay? So suddenly, there was a situation where people did not have exactly what they needed. They had something less in some degree. In other words, I had the do good, what I ought to have, and suddenly after sin, there's the do good, but there's now something that shouldn't be there. And that affects the total picture. The harmony is compromised, okay? Now, the human person is made for that first harmony. Was not made for suffering and death. Okay, this is just an automatic conclusion from original intent. But now, in the human experience, there is something that shouldn't be there. And our nature, human nature, made for perfect justice, perfect order, expects the perfect justice and perfect order to be there. But that doesn't exist anymore. But we expect it to. So we have the programming from the first order. We were created for the good. We were created for joy. We were created for wholeness, beauty, truth, goodness, uninterrupted. Total community all the time, total harmony all the time. But now we don't have it because there's a monkey wrench in the clockwork. And the don't have it can be any one of an infinite number of possible deprivations. So what does human nature do in light of that situation? it looks for the first order. It looks for justice. In every single situation where it experiences injustice, which is every single situation, human nature is driven by its own hardwiring, given by God, to look for justice. And so, that drive pushes me to two contrary things at the same time. One, I want to get all of my needs met all the time. I want to be well and whole in myself. Okay, and that's from the original order. I ought to have been. Okay, it should have been easy, although challenging. I should have been engaged. I should have felt fully alive. Challenge is not contrary to this. You know, like a good game of chess or a football. That's good, but not trial. Not a game of chess where there's a 40% chance of being killed by my opponent. Okay, not that's different. It's different. So challenge, but not trial. Okay, things that make a person fully alive. So we look for being fully alive. We look for the original order. Now, me getting all my needs met on that first order wouldn't interfere with you getting all yours met because we'd be in harmony. Okay, there would be a providential governing of things. And now that isn't quite so with the exact same harmony. So if I'm really thirsty and this is the only water, and I have the water, you're not going to have the water. So let's hope that you're not really thirsty, right? But what if you are? And I drink all the water. Well, you don't get your needs met. Okay, so that's the first thing. I want to meet all my needs. Second thing is I want to meet your needs. Why? Because I was made for community. I want to be in harmony with others. I want you to be okay, and I want to be okay. So I also have a natural drive to have concern for how you're doing. Okay, so I'm in conflict right away here. I'm concerned about me, and I'm concerned about you, but I can't have both. So what's the right thing to do? Well, we're taught that you should put others before yourself. Okay, so I should do that. So I'm going to give you my water, and I don't have enough water, but I'm thirsty. Okay, I'm going to do it because I'm a trooper. You know, I'm going to do it for God. And all right, so I do that, and I suffer a bit. Yep, resolve of willpower. Going to do it. How long does it last? The perfection of that self-outpouring for your needs. Not too long. Why? Because the other part of my nature, which is seeking justice, protests. Okay. Now, I might have a very strong will, and I can say, "Shut up," and just squish it down. But look at what's happening. Was I meant to say shut up and squish it down? Was I meant to be in a fight with myself, according to God's original intent? No. Therefore, I can't do it perfectly. I might be able to do it admirably, but not perfectly. And so all that pushing down someday is going to right back up. And that's why you can have someone dedicated to a life of virtue and preaching the gospel who's also involved in gay sex and crystal meth behind the scenes. Okay? Not because they're bad in their heart. It's because they're pushing something down in order to do something else, but the pushing down doesn't work because you're not meant to push down. Okay? And it just comes right back, and it comes back with a vengeance.
Church needs this.
Now, this is happening for everybody. They want to do what is good for others. It's not that we just want for ourselves, but we also want ourselves. We want to be well. We want others to be well, and we want to be well. And if you look in small children before they've been seriously injured, this is the basis for their behaviors. It's not just selfishness. It's, I want the cookie, and I want you to have the cookie. And there's actually a confusion about why it can't be both of us can have our needs met. There's a presumption that there's no such thing as, if I have it, you can't have it. Okay?
It's a presumption of lack, right?
Yeah. And they learn that very violently. It's not a matter of maturity. The maturity is in the first mode, and that gets beaten out. And we forget about it. We forget that we need what we need and others need within. Okay, so we're in conflict, and we're compelled towards selfishness. Even if we hate sin, even if we hate our selfishness, we still do it. So why did God not program us to be more moral? Well, he programmed us in the purest way that he possibly could, which was for a just world. He didn't program us with reference to evil at all, because evil was never meant to be. So he made us innocent. Evil had no say, and we're still that way. And that's why there's so much sin, okay? Because we just want to be well. Now, and this is also why our sins can be forgiven, because we're not even when we're doing it, we don't really want it. Okay?
Okay.
And we know it doesn't make us happy even when we're doing it, but we're compelled by this mysterious thing. And why is it so crazy? It's crazy because we're sane. We're looking for justice. And we're looking for justice because we're made in the image of God. So we sin because we're good. All right? And he wants to save us from that. He wants to save us from that injury that makes us do the things we don't want to do, which is what St. Paul says. Now, I haven't answered your question yet. So, now, the spiritual journey. What does he have to do to get us out of that? And also out of every other aspect that I haven't talked about that also happened because of the original sin. All right? There's maybe 9 or 10 big deal things that he has to solve. Okay. In order for us to be able to sacrifice, in order for me to be able to put you first ahead of myself and forego my natural needs being met, I need something other than my own power to do it. And the church has said this, but not in this exact language here. Really, I need God to possess me. I need him to live in me and do the sacrificing for me because he's not threatened by lack. I am. All right? He has to be the one who's in charge, who's making these actions in me. Now, how can he do that? Is he like the devil who will possess you, willy-nilly if you, play with the Ouija board or something? No. He comes in only through permission, free will, and, okay, so we want him to do that as quickly as possible, right? Sure. Okay, so we start praying, Lord, possess me, give me the grace to do your will. All right. Well, what happens when he starts to come in? Now, this is after we've come to know the Lord and we've been generous with him, and consolations in prayer, deep, conversion. All right. So this is not day one. This is when we've really decided I want to be changed. He then comes and starts to take us out of the system of things here. The system of things being our quest for justice here, right? Which can never, ever work, right? But it's what we're all doing. We're trying to establish a justice here for ourselves.
And we're hungry and thirsty for it.
Exactly.
Right.
We're utterly driven.
Right.
We cannot stop. And anything that we do in that regard will not be real justice. It will involve some element of lack somewhere that we are choosing to white out. We're overlooking that. So let's say I decide, for my justice, I'm going to become a playboy and indulge in pleasure. And I work real hard to get wealthy, and okay. In doing that, I've blanked out most of being. Okay? I've blanked out human dignity for everyone else other than myself. People are objects, and really, I am an object as well. I don't see myself as how I was when I was little. And to even go there for a second, before I was hurt in a big, it's like, no, it's poison, right? Because why? Because it afflicts my justice that I'm making for myself. I have to not reflect on innocence. Keep the innocence away. I have to not reflect on death. I have to not reflect on anything other than what fits my sense of justice. Now, there might be another one. I might become religious. I might become devout. I'm going to serve God with everything that I am. Okay? But let's say it's just coming from my own master plan. I'm going to do it right, and what have I done? How have I attained justice here? I've put myself here and everyone else down here. All the rabble who don't serve God. And really, if I look at it, if the Holy Spirit shines light on it, I see, oh, really, this has nothing to do with God at all. This has to do with me being king of the hill.
That's right.
And you had this in your revelation too, that up to a point you thought you could manage that.
Yeah.
You thought you could manage your own disorder. Disordered.
Yeah. If I only just worked a little harder. And, I didn't know I was Pelagian. I thought I was doing the Catholic thing, really, because I was going to the sacraments.
Sorry, just Pelagian. I don't mean to vocalize my ignorance. But
Somebody else who actually knows history will say, but take the note and ask the question. Pelagius was a heretic who said basically we can do it on our own.
Oh,
But
okay.
there's
All right,
more
so
to that.
okay. No, that's all I just,
Okay, so the ways that we can create false justices for ourselves are pretty much infinite in their particularity, but there's really only like 5 or 6 models. All right, everyone's doing one of the 5 or 6 things, like denial of certain evils. Do we really know what happened at Hiroshima as we go day to day in our lives? I'm paying my bills and brushing my. Do I realize that I'm sharing the same world as those people did? Do I really realize it? Do I know where I am? No. I'm in my own little sphere, which has a certain extent that involves certain other people and certain problems. Okay? And I try to make that sphere as narrow as I can to be able to do well and feel good. All right? I try to keep relationships under control. Okay, so that's basically it. We try to keep a sphere just. We make a little Garden of Eden for ourselves and try to manage it and keep out the bats. All right? Now, false justice involves the denial of humanity outside of ourselves and our own humanity. God has to save us from that if he is to possess us and act through us and bring us to our real destiny, which is real justice. He wants to give us real justice, okay? But in order to do that, he needs our permission to let him take away the false justice. Now, what will that feel like to our hearts, which are driven by our goodness given from God to seek justice? It's going to feel like death. Poverty.
Would you have this
Yep,
revelation?
poverty, death, affliction. God is killing me. Okay, he's got one tooth left. Hit him. Oh, fill his mouth with sand now. That's what it's going to feel like. Now, not to say that God can't console us. Of course he can. Of course he can. Not to say that he can't do a lot of this in secret. Of course he can. He does it as painlessly as he possibly can. But he needs our permission to do it. Okay? And in order for us to give him permission, he has to bring to light what he wants us to give permission for him to do. Okay? In some manner or another. Now, the thing that comes to light might not be the same as the thing that comes to light to somebody else. Okay? So, but he needs our yes. We will fight him tooth and nail once he starts doing this. It will seem like we know nothing in the spiritual life when he brings us to a new frontier of our own false justice and starts to give us himself. It will feel like he's taking away everything good and invalidating my entire past. I'm invalid as a human being. Because the thing that made me feel whole and well and beautiful is now being afflicted by God. Right? It's being taken on. I don't see God. I just know that what made me okay is now falling apart. Okay. This is not him wanting to hurt us. It's him wanting to save us from definitive suffering, which is that our false justice be mistaken for something that is.
And I think in terms of the butterfly effect that you talked about, it seems like a dinosaur-sized butterfly now in the world that flapped its wings already. Because you're talking about the manifestation of sin in the physical world. So at the same time, everybody's going to have to deal with that. So, and that all of those systems are falling away, and they are from the financial system, food distribution system, water supply system, social. They're all in a process of their right. So I think from us is ultimately for any communication to people is what's the need? Are you meeting an unmet need? So right. So I think we're going to be able to tie it to those needs more and more as the world's.
So what's going on is he's trying to save us from the world that's falling apart. And we don't know that it's falling apart. Why? Because we were never meant to know that it was falling apart. We're not meant to know evil. All right? It's not part of our makeup. So we don't know where we are. We think we're home. We don't know who we are. We think we're on a quest to be well. Okay? And we're going to be able to do it here when people are falling into their graves. It's insane, but we're compelled to think that. We don't know who God is. Because we're meant to understand everything that comes to us as a gift from God, mediated through creatures. But now we're suffering and dying, so that must be a gift from God. What does that say about God? Everything is confused because of the original programming. We can't see straight, we can't act straight. And he has to bring us out of that in order to save us. Now, bringing us out of that is bringing us out of everything that we think makes us well, and so it feels like that. So we fight. Even though we're good, we fight. We say, God, come and save me, and then we say no the next day. What is this likened to? A child who is in a burning building, hiding in the closet. All right? Child thinks he's safe. All right? This is the best he can do. This is his master plan. I'll wait it out in here in the closet.
And it feels cooler, so it makes
It feels
sense.
cooler. There's no smoke. Great. Fireman comes in with what intent? To save the child. All right? So he knocks on the closet. Bobby, come out. The closet's locked from the inside. I know you can't lock the closet from the inside, but just hear me. He won't open the door. He won't even respond. Bobby, come out. All right? The child starts to get scared. Fireman's yelling. Does the fireman want to scare the child?
No.
How does he feel about the child being scared?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does he have to do?
Break the door.
Yeah. How does the child feel? Terrified.
Violated, yeah.
Okay. What's the fireman doing?
Safer.
How does he feel about the child being scared and violent? Yeah. That's the same thing.
I look at it like you're cut here, right, and you press on it, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor's a physician to fix it, but he can't get to it unless you let go of it.
Yep. And
You gotta let go of it.
why does he have to separate us from the world? Because he doesn't want us to set our heart on something that's guaranteed to fail.
Right.
That's why he says, don't do this, do that.
So you're saying, in essence, the world's gonna go down.
Yeah, he doesn't want us to go.
And you need to separate it before you go with it.
Yep. That's one aspect of the answer to your question. Okay.
No, I just have a couple of comments. Well, there are many, but one real standout for me, well, there are two standouts, is that this is impactful for an individual on a journey, but also the church institutionally. Because we're talking about, individual sin, but also corporate sin. I think that is a huge issue that we, like you referenced the priests, that why do we have homosexual, meth using, but they also have the capacity to do this and then the capacity to do that. We have those problems living within the institutional
Yes,
church. So there's the individual, I think, application of this, but also the application, if the church was really using this type of application, how set free would the church be and how much more effective?
You'd have many more saints. And, volumes could be written about any one of these things. And in fact, they have been. That's what the doctors of the church have been doing. But this brings it all together into a point where everything the church has ever said hangs together now and is illumined, and the confusion that keeps these internet question and answer forums going and the debates between different denominations and even the debate between atheists and believers. These questions are basically settled. Not to say that there won't ever be new questions. There will always be new questions. But the questions that are there really can be answered because God is mystery and gives of himself freely. He's generous about that. The notion of being possessed by God and how important that is, rather than us, fighting the moral fight ourselves. So, okay, that's really important and really kind of new in the minds of the people. But the notion of possession, as understood by the saints in this context, it's not possession that's one-sided.
Right.
We possess God.
Right.
As well. It's a marriage. We own the divine nature, okay, as he owns our human nature. It's like we become another incarnation.
Espoused.
Not to say anything too edgy, but really we're drawn into divinity. We become divinized. And we as Christians basically have no idea that that's the core of the gospel, is that the human person is...
Well, it's not being taught. That's the problem.
Well, I know. It's absolutely tragic. We're left with a moral consideration and the forgiveness of moral wrongs. You go from the ranks of the damned to the ranks of the saved, and that's the good news. That's not the good news. No. The good news is that God has taken human nature to himself and given us the divine nature in exchange. So he makes us gods by participation.
Well, and that's the other point that I was going to make about this the totality of all of this, is that the question of evil, you go back to the question of evil and why do bad things happen to good people and all that jazz. The reality is, without the catechesis around this content, you're wandering, totally lost. And so the church is remiss in her, role as, teacher if we don't have the understanding that helps lends to the understanding of being able to how to live in this espoused manner with God. Otherwise we don't understand why anything happens.
We can't explain to people the core message of redemptive suffering and what it means.
Right.
If we try, we end up saying something that is like, God approves of suffering for a redemptive purpose.
Right.
Really, redemptive suffering is something he created so that my suffering, which he didn't create, becomes infinitely powerful and meaningful.
Right.
It becomes the same as Christ's suffering. And what does Christ's suffering accomplish? The redemption of the whole world.
Victory.
So what does my suffering accomplish in union with Christ? The redemption of the whole world.
Right.
And it's not a partial share. It's the whole thing, just like each Mass, all throughout the world, though multiple, is the whole thing. So my suffering is the suffering of Christ, whole and entire, and so is yours.
Right.
And it's a paradox, but it's the same paradox as the Mass. But we get the whole glory of saving everyone from the devil's hand and giving meaning to everybody's life, and including God's in a sense, because he makes it so that, because he's so generous, because he loves each of us so much, he makes it so that he doesn't accomplish any good thing ever in all of eternity apart from you. So it's all through you and me.
Right.
But all through you for me and all through me for you. And that's unity. And that's the full integration of everything, and that's his standard of justice. And we have no idea. We've sold him out so bad on justice and what he's trying to accomplish and what the good news is. The good news isn't even good news anymore.
It's how Mary is a model of discipleship, not just that we can strive to imitate Mary, but rather it's an example of what God can do in one entirely yielded and entirely in union, such that Mary is viewed as co-redemptrix. That's the destiny intended for us as well.
Where is this description of human destiny explicitly stated in the Bible? This description that seems like I'm off my rocker from a Christian perspective in saying that every good thing that God does, every just intervention, countering evil, elevating the lowly, bringing the mighty down from their thrones, everything happens through me. And this is for everybody. Where is that in the Bible? Mary says it in the Magnificat. Okay? We don't know what she means. Through her, the mighty have been cast down from their thrones, and the lowly have been elevated. Through her, he has shown mercy on every generation. She's talking about this. She's talking about what he does in us to save us from any diminishment whatsoever and make us as glorious as he can possibly make us, possibly, with no holding back. So what can omnipotence bestow upon an individual person? That's in fact what he has given. Anything that's possible to give to glorify us, he has given. And Mary is the first to report on this in the Magnificat. We don't know what the Magnificat means, but she's talking about God accomplishing his justice in her as the first instance of this new order. And then through her, it passes to everyone else. Okay? But when it passes, really, it's not diluted. It's through me, God has accomplished even what he accomplished in Mary. Okay? Through the prayers of the church, through the prayers of the Israelites crying out for justice, through all of history, all of time, those prayers are answered in her. Okay? So my sufferings give rise to the grace that allows Mary to be conceived immaculately, to be the first instance of the new order. So everyone is integrated with everyone, and there's no one who is left behind like that,
So that she started the first ripple of the new order.
Well, no, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity did it, and she was the first human instance in space and time to live this destiny, to know God and to know his action in the world. Okay? And this is the language, by the way. What's in divine justice, the paradigm here, is the language by which we can actually define the further Marian dogmas. We don't have the way of explaining it to people. We have the intuition that it's so. Mediatrix of all grace. We have no idea how to unpack that so as not to alienate everybody and just be confusing. This way it makes perfect sense. And even though it's not said in there explicitly, people have picked up on it. They say, oh, so this means that Mary really is the mediatrix of all grace. Well, yes. But we also are unique mediators of all grace for everyone, including Mary. Okay? collectively, corporately. Right? Why? How do I know that? Because her life, the grace that she received, obtained through the merits of her Son, the sufferings. Okay, we're in union with her Son.
Right.
Okay,
And
and
it's in union with her.
we have been for all time. Really, there was no time during which the redemption was not brought. Okay, it permeates all space and time. From the foundation of the world, the Lamb was slain. So,
That's right.
it's always been
That's right.
well, in a sense, even though it's the cross.